All right. Hello, everyone. We're going to start our webinar today. Thank you very much for joining us. We're very happy to be with you today. This is a new session that we're running, so we hope that it hits the spot for you and your organizations and your talent development process. My name is Helen Schroeder. I'm the Marketing Project Manager at Sigma, and I will be co-facilitating your webinar today with my colleague, Dr. Arieana Thompson. And for those of you who are new to Sigma Assessment Systems, we're a professional services firm that does talent development, succession planning, and psychological assessments for organizations like yours who are looking to build your internal talent pools. We've been in business for over 50 years, so as a company, we have a lot of experience, and we're thrilled to bring some of that to you today. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We have got about 60 minutes together today. And for the first 45 minutes or so, Arieana is going to be sharing the webinar content with you. No need to take frantic notes. The session is being recorded, and you will receive both a copy of the recording and the slides following the webinar. We'll also leave about 15 minutes at the end of the session for some live Q&A. So if you have questions, feel free to post it in the Q&A or in the chat. I'll monitor that throughout the session. Same thing if you're having any IT issues or other questions. And then we'll leave some time at the end of the webinar to go through those questions together. And I know sometimes it takes other questions to get the juices flowing, so feel free to keep posting those once the Q&A starts. Anything that we don't get time to cover during our session today, we'd be happy to follow up via email. So you're welcome to send questions, or if you'd like to hop on a one-on-one call to discuss your organizational context in particular based on the content in the webinar, feel free to use that email. It's under Dr. Arieana's name on the slides there, and we'd be happy to follow up with you individually. But for now, please don't hesitate to use the Q&A and the chat box. That's what it's there for. And without any further ado, I will introduce you to Dr. Arieana Thompson and hand things over to her to get the webinar started. So Dr. Arieana Thompson is a senior leadership consultant here at Sigma. She believes in positively transforming the modern day workplace through thought-provoking, evidence-based insights. Arieana is a subject matter expert in executive leadership, succession management, wellness cultures, and employee growth. And in her work here at Sigma, she supports the executive teams with succession planning and leadership development, as well as talent assessment. So you are in great hands today. Thank you, Dr. Arieana Thompson, for being with us, and I will hand things over to you now.
Thank you, Helen. It's wonderful to be here today leading our webinar, Talent Assessments for Leadership Development, Data-Driven Strategies to Grow Exceptional Leaders. With that, let's jump in. To give you a sense of where we're going with this session today, I've prepared a brief agenda. First, we're going to be starting with understanding why to leverage talent assessments. Sigma Assessment Systems really grew our organization based on psychometric assessments, and we're really passionate about the variety of ways that you can effectively apply them to your workforce planning and development. And they're specifically a great tool for leadership development, which we'll talk about more in the session. Also discuss the role of objectivity in assessment work, and then explore how to integrate assessment insights into other parts of your organizational processes, and leveraging assessments to drive self-awareness, to leverage strengths, to learn about your areas of development, and then ultimately propel growth. Lastly, we'll talk about preparing for and taking action towards development. So we'll talk about scaling leadership development programs across teams and levels, and why it's so important to measure progress and demonstrate impact over time. So we'll begin with a poll question. We have a number of poll questions throughout the session just to get you to know you better, provide some opportunities for engagement, and learn more about where you're at today. So our first question for you today is, which area of leadership development is most important for your organization right now? Would you say that's improving current leader performance, increasing general engagement and retention across your workforce, building a pipeline of future leaders, or just generally strengthening your organizational culture? And we'll give everybody a few minutes. Helen, I'm having a hard time accessing the poll data, so maybe you can read those out for us once they come in.
Yes, absolutely. So we've got 30% saying that their priority is to improve current leader performance. 10% say that increasing engagement and retention is the priority. 47% for building a pipeline of future leaders. That's the winner for today's group. And then 13% strengthening organizational culture.
Excellent. So while leadership is really important for team engagement, retention, and general culture, it sounds like our group today is really focused on building a pipeline of future leaders and improving current leader performance. So that's wonderful. It's really specific to what we're talking about today. All right, we have one more follow-up question before we dive into more content, and that's how often does your organization leverage assessments for leadership development? Would you say that this is regularly and a part of a structured leadership program that you have? Occasionally, maybe use assessments at times for specific roles or projects. Would you say rarely, but you're interested in using them more? Or lastly, never. This would be a new approach for us to leverage assessments as part of leadership development. All right, Helen, how's the data looking?
We've got, just close the poll. We've got 11% saying assessments are being used regularly as part of a structured program. So that's fantastic. 25% say occasionally for specific roles or projects. 36%, the winner for today is rarely, but we are interested in using them more. And then 29% saying never, this would be a new approach for us.
Excellent. Well, it's wonderful to have so many people who are not actively using assessments, as that provides more opportunity to really talk about assessments, how they can be leveraged, and what type of assessments you might look at. So thank you so much for your participation in these polls. So why leverage assessments for leadership development? First and foremost, talent assessments provide objective insight. If you find validated psychometric assessment tools, then you can uncover your talent strengths, gaps, and hidden potential. Also, assessments provide personalized development because you get very specific scientific reports based on your own personality or your leadership team's personality, leadership traits, and beyond. So this really gives you personalized data to drive results. And these data insights can really guide the development of tailored plans that align with both employee growth and where your employees need to grow, as well as aligning it with organizational goals. And lastly, developmental progress must be measurable. So assessments provide the baseline so you can know where your people are today, and then also support tracking development over time. So today I'm really going to anchor this conversation in Sigma's talent development process, which we also do use and apply in the majority of cases to leadership development as well. And this is based on best practices, and our structured framework really aligns people practices with business goals. So phase one of our model is to identify the talent you need. This is the first phase where you discover organizational priorities and examine future directions. In industrial organizational psychology, we often call this doing a needs assessment, so you can understand the current needs in order to align that with future priorities. And that's why phase two is then moving into understanding the talent you have. So this is looking at the talent in your organization today, assessing that talent's strengths and growth areas using assessment tools and talent reviews. And then what this does is it prepares you for phase three, which is closing the gap between the talent that you need and the talent that you have. And this is actually a very comprehensive step of our process, which involves a number of elements, including preparing leaders for their team's development, building development plans, implementing growth strategies, and measuring progress. All right, another poll question for you. What is your biggest challenge in leadership development today? So we're going to jump into greater detail on each of those steps, but we're curious about what challenges you face. Is it a lack of clarity on what exactly should be developed? Is it limited access to tools or resources? Is it having difficulty engaging leaders in the process? Or facing an inability or a challenge in measuring progress? You could also say other, and if you say other, please add what that challenge is to the chat for us. All right, Helen, how's it looking?
We've got 7% saying our biggest challenge is lack of clarity on what to develop. 33% are saying limited tools and resources. The biggest category today was difficulty engaging leaders in the process, which we do see often. And then 11% saying inability to measure progress, which assessments are a great place to start.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll really talk about that limited tools and resources as well. And this whole process will be a way of engaging leaders in a process of development. So thank you so much for sharing. All right, we're going to begin by focusing on phase one, identifying the talent that you need. So effective development starts with clarity. And using a strong competency model to define effective leadership in your organization is a really helpful place to start. So there's a lot of different ways you can define a competency model. Many organizations may already have a competency model for their leaders, or they might be interested in creating one new. But this is something that we actually help clients on a lot at Sigma Assessment Systems. So I've presented our own leadership competency model here, which is actually more of a general framework that we use to then develop competency models based on organizational context. So these are 50 leadership competencies in our leadership competency framework. And you see we have these 4 buckets of cognitive leadership skills, which represent skills like business acumen and decisiveness. We have interpersonal leadership skills, which are things like communication and formal presentation. We have personal leadership qualities, which are things like desire to learn and independence. And lastly, we have senior leadership skills, which include things like delegation and developing and coaching others. So we often work with clients with these 50 competencies, and then we'll do a senior leadership workshop and narrow this down to 5 to 10 competencies that really represent their organizational context and what it means to be an effective leader at their organization. I will say that sometimes certain competencies come up repetitively, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. For example, integrity is a common leadership competency that makes it into a competency model, but having integrity is also essential for organizational functioning. And then other times, other competencies will diverge and really represent the uniqueness of the organizational context. And using these competencies can really guide development as you're saying, this is what our organization says is effective leadership, and these are the qualities we want to see across all of our top leaders. So we can also do this for the role level as well, and we do in creating what we call success profiles. We'll also identify what's needed for, let's say, a director of HR or another specific position, and then we'll have core role competencies. But right now I'm talking about leadership competencies. And it really provides a common language for assessment, feedback, and development planning. So again, here you want to prioritize the most impactful skills by identifying 5 to 10 leadership competencies that elevate performance and represent effective performance at your organization as a leader. And you always want to align this with strategy and culture. So you'll want to choose competencies that reflect your goals, values, and your future state. All right, another poll for you today is which of the following best describes your current leadership competency framework? Would you say we have a clear and validated framework? We have one, but it's outdated or incomplete, meaning you have one, but maybe it's not fully integrated into your systems? Would you say you're in the process of developing one, or you do not currently use a leadership competency framework? All right, Helen, how's the data looking?
One moment. Here we are. 19% are saying that we do have a clear and validated framework, which is fantastic. 15% are saying we have one, but it's outdated or incomplete. 30%, about a third, are saying we're in the process of developing one. And 37%, biggest category for today, say that we do not currently use a competency framework.
Excellent. This one has a lot more variety, so that's great if you already have one or you're in the process of developing it. But if you need it revamped or need to start on one completely, that's something Sigma can help you with. And that's something we'd love to support. So if you have any questions on this, you can ask us at the end of the session or reach out to us.
And I'll post a link to that competency framework that Arieana shared in the chat for you.
Perfect. Thank you, Helen. And then last thing on this first phase is to consider your future strategy. So you want to consider your future directions as a leadership team and as an organization. And this allows you to make strategic decisions about your talent by assessing your current state versus your future goals and vision. So a lot of times when we're doing a competency workshop with leaders, we actually have a full conversation about where are you today and where do you want to go in the future. And there's been a lot of disruptions to the current economy and market, as we likely have all been experiencing. And this can impact strategy, and you may have to make different decisions based on different technologies that are impacting your organization, based on your growth goals. For example, if you want to grow your organization by 20-30%, that will impact your strategy and talent and beyond. So there's a lot of different considerations that we go through with executive teams, and it's something that we would recommend for everyone as well. As if you only focus on today, you might miss competencies that will take you and propel you into the future. So you can also consider, after some of these conversations, areas for investment as well. And you can use these insights to highlight future areas of growth and resource allocation. And that resource allocation can, and in my opinion, should include talent initiatives as well, including leadership development. All right, phase two. So in phase one, we were really focusing on identifying the talent we need to succeed as an organization. So phase two is the inverse, in a way, of understanding the talent you have today. And I'm really talking about people you already have in your organization. So take stock of your current leadership pipeline. Map out, and I'm talking really map it out, put it all down on paper or on a Word doc or whatever resources you use. Look at your current leaders and your emerging talent and see, who do we have? Really take note of everybody. Cast a wide net at this time of really looking at our talent and saying, who is available to be a part of our future leadership and how are they doing today? We really recommend employing a leadership assessment to reveal what observation cannot. So we'll talk a little bit soon about doing leader observations through talent review surveys. But an assessment is a great tool to provide additional objectivity and to gain insights about current leadership capabilities. For leadership assessments, we at Sigma Assessment Systems use what's called the LSP-R, which is the Leadership Skills Profile Revised. And I'll even show an example of an LSP-R later in this session. But I'll just mention that now, and Helen might drop some links to the top 3 assessments that we'll be talking about today. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. I'll just take a quick drink. There's COVID going around again, unfortunately. So that's the leadership assessment that we would recommend, and it's based on that same leadership model that I just showed you, those 50 leadership competencies. So if you use that framework to create competency model, then the leadership skills profile revised is a perfect accompaniment as it matches one-to-one to the competencies that are displayed there. We also recommend understanding reputation and relationships through 360 feedback. And if you're new to this concept of 360 feedback, this is when you get input from everyone around that individual. So let's say if it's a supervisor, you would get their own supervisor's report. You get direct reports to provide feedback on their performance, as well as anyone else, such as colleagues or clients. And it really shows how leaders are seen by others and gives additional insight for that individual around how am I coming across to others and how can I maybe shift accordingly. And lastly, we can deepen assessment insights with things like emotional intelligence and character-based assessments. I personally just adore these assessments, as emotional intelligence and character really are strong leadership qualities that we're looking for in our leadership, and they're going to be qualities that drive performance as well. If we have a really emotionally in tune leader, they're going to be really effective in leading their team and getting the best performance out of their team, as well as if they're leading with character. So when I say character, we have a whole character framework that includes character-based qualities such as having humanity, humility, having drive, having qualities like transcendence. So these are really interesting qualities to look at, and it's just another level of insight that you can get from assessments. You can also conduct talent reviews. So this is when we actually want to get some of that data from senior leaders to work with the assessment data that we're getting. Really, more information is always better. So here you want to engage senior leaders in identifying gaps in future leadership needs through a structured talent review with rating scales. So here's an example of what a talent review survey looks like at Sigma. So here at Sigma, we use 6 different areas to do a talent review survey, and these are areas we believe are really important for leadership growth. And what we'll do is we'll have a leader rate all of their direct reports across these dimensions, and then we'll collect the data to see what their overall score is. So you see we have performance, so that's the most typical that's measured. So showing strong performance in current role. But then we also have things like initiative. Do they take advantage of opportunities to lead and develop themselves? We look at feedback. Can they take feedback well and show growth over time? Does this individual have strategic alignment, meaning that they are on board with and proactively support the company's mission and vision? We look at relationships. How is their relationship with supervisors, peers, and direct reports? And lastly, we more recently added this final category of motivation to lead. So is this individual interested in occupying a leadership role? And what we found in our succession planning work and our leadership development practice is that motivation to lead is and research shows as well, as we did do a literature review to develop this model, it really shows that having a motivation to lead others and to be in a leadership position is really important. And I highlight this because this actually does come up a lot in our organizational consulting and especially succession planning, but in other domains as well, is people really are interested in, well, Kevin says he really doesn't want to develop into a next level position. Should we just take him on his word, or we know he's a really good employee and we could see the potential for him? What do we do about this? This is when it is really helpful to have one-on-one conversations with your employees to understand the rationale why they don't want to lead. Some people are more introverted and they prefer to just be task-oriented, and maybe they never want to take on a leadership position. However, we've also seen that sometimes it can depend on the person's current life circumstances. For example, maybe they have 3 young kids and they just don't see the opportunity to take on additional responsibility at this time. And that's when we might say this is someone who we might revisit. So these are just really important conversations to have along the way. But all that to say, this is what a talent review survey looks like. We'd get a score for each individual, and then we could use that to see where they need to grow. Also, how they score across these areas is also helpful information. For example, if you recognize that someone on your team maybe doesn't have the best relationships, then you could work on their relationships. Or maybe they have a hard time taking feedback, and that's an area you could focus as well. So once you've given assessments, it's really important to debrief the results and build insight. So some of our clients have at times just wanted to buy the assessments without a debrief, which is fine. We do provide information for providing and facilitating an assessment debrief, but we do believe that this assessment debrief is essential to drive understanding and self-awareness. The only thing that I would say you could substitute for an assessment debrief would be a one-on-one coaching session with someone who is experienced in the assessment that you're providing. And this is essential as it really helps professionals make sense of their results. Even if you feel like an assessment report is intuitive or it's something you know really well, there's a high likelihood that the average professional who is not deep in this field will not feel comfortable reading their report themselves, fully making sense of it, and also getting those insights that you're looking for, which is why you provided the assessment. So providing a comprehensive debrief, helping them understand each element of their report and how to use the insights is really important. It's also the best time to highlight key strengths and development areas, as this is what the data insights are for. So you can focus the conversations around what matters most and help them get the high-level insights that are going to help them the most. You can also frame it as a growth opportunity. So especially when we do group level debriefs, we'll sometimes ask people to share what is one of your highest competencies? What's one of the competencies you'd like to work on? And ideally, everyone will put that in the chat and we'll get one from everybody. And it really normalizes like, look, we all have areas of strength and we all have areas that we need to grow in. And they could be different. And someone else's strength could be your area of opportunity, and maybe that's someone you can even learn from, and maybe it's inverse and you have something else to teach somebody else. So it's really normalizing learning and avoiding that defensiveness. You can also build buy-in through transparency. So this helps to reinforce trust in the data, in the process. Oftentimes leaders like being included in something new and exciting, and there's a lot of clarity on what the data is and how they can grow from it. And so that can really support more leader engagement. And then lastly in this section, I really want to talk about something called the 9-box. So we have a whole webinar on this. So you can either join a future webinar or get access to another if this is a topic you're really interested in, but I'm just going to touch on it today. But if you've never heard of the 9-box technique, this is a technique that can be used to identify high potential leaders. And here at Sigma, we actually don't love using the 9-box technique across all teams at all times, as ideally you're able to focus on all of your leaders and not necessarily needing to handpick a special few for a high potential program. Nevertheless, that is sometimes the case in an organization with limited resources and lots of leaders. So we do want to present this as an opportunity for making objective decisions when you can only focus resources on a limited amount of people for comprehensive development programs. So what it does is it pairs talent review data with assessment data to make more objective talent conversations and then decisions. So ultimately, we're talking about decisions to join a high potential leadership development program. And you can use the 9-box grid to visualize the axes of potential and performance. And then you can use this to identify leaders with high potential. So let's look at this at the two axes. So on the lower axis, we have leader rated potential. So that would be data coming straight from the talent review survey. And you would see where each person falls in terms of leader rated potential. But you also would look at assessment rated potential. And we've chosen to use the word potential here as our assessments and assessments in general, they show potential and predictive information, but we don't want to call it performance at this time, because we really like the concept of this is where people can grow, but we might not always have the ultimate truth, but we are leveraging objective data to make the best decisions possible. So we would have assessment rated potential blended with leader rated potential, and then we'd map out where our talent falls across these 9 boxes. And you see if leader rated potential is low and assessment rated potential is low, it'll just be generally low potential. And then at the high end, if they're both high, then it will be called top potential. So we have some kind of funny fictitious names here to map out to show you how this might work in process. Usually we'd have probably a lot more names. With our clients, we often have 20 to 30 people that we're mapping out to then maybe select the top 10 to 15 leaders for that year, that leadership development cohort. But this just shows how it could be mapped out. So over here in unverified potential, we have Sam Silver. He's been highly rated from his leader, but his assessment rated potential was lower. In contrast, we have Reggie Red, who had high assessment rated potential, but low leader rated potential, and kind of everything in between. And what we would recommend is making sure you select the right assessment for the $9. It can't just be any assessment because you want to make sure that you're focused on the right domain of potential. So for this, we'd recommend the Leadership Skills Profile Revised, which again is our top leadership assessment that we have that maps on to those 50 leadership competencies. Again, we're talking about observed leadership potential and leveraging psychometric assessments to really enhance the validity of decisions. And anytime we're making decisions at an organizational setting, such as hiring, promotion, inclusion in programs, we want to make sure that they're really objective and valid and not having any adverse impact across different groups. And it can also enhance employee buy-in as assessments are involved in the process and everyone can actually get that assessment as it's core information needed for the $9 and everyone can participate in the debrief, but maybe they understand that only a few people can be selected each year for a specialized program. And I just want to highlight the LSP-R real quick. Again, that's the Leadership Skills Profiles Revised. And here is what the focus report section, so the main snapshot section of our report shows. You can see that at the top, you'll see strengths. Then we have something called a My Zone, which is the competencies that have potential to be developed and become strengths. And then below the My Zone, we have development opportunities. So you see for this individual is really strong in business acumen and decisiveness, but they might struggle a little bit in areas like facilitating teamwork and developing and coaching others, some of those more interpersonal skills. So this would be helpful information for someone looking to develop their leadership. We also want to highlight that we are providing a free LSP-R trial. If you're interested in testing this out, we're happy to give you a free LSP-R for yourself, and you can see whether or not you think it would be a great tool for your team as well. So if you're interested, we can provide a link to take the test on our online testing platform. You can have access to the full LSP-R assessment and get automatically generated results personalized to you. And that will include a full LSP-R focus report with all the scoring definitions and development activities. We can also provide a sample report here if you're interested in looking at that today. All right, closing out this second phase, we want to remind you to look at group level patterns, not just individual data. So the great thing about assessing an entire group is that you can look at all of the data collectively and identify team level or whole organization level gaps and areas of opportunity, as well as strengths. And you can apply these data insights to inform development planning at the group level to focus attention and investment where it matters most. All right, now we are getting to phase 3, which is closing the gap between the talent that you need and the talent that you have. So first and foremost, you need to prepare your leaders or your supervisors or your managers for this team development to be occurring. So too often we jump into development planning, but we haven't prepared the people that are leading those people. So this is something that we really think is important and believe in at Sigma, and we really recommend that you provide people leaders with their own coaching, as they need to help coach their direct reports, not simply manage them, especially if you're going to create a culture of development for your leaders. So you're going to need to equip supervisors, managers, anyone who's overseeing direct reports with the skills to guide growth, to hold development conversations, and to reinforce progress of their direct reports development. And what we recommend to do this is providing what is called a Leader as Coach leadership training session. So this is something Sigma does offer, or you can create in your own organization. But what you want to do is you want to develop leaders' abilities to provide development to their direct reports. So having the conversations around what are your career goals? Where do you want to go? How can we find stretch opportunities for you? We'll get into more about development in a second here, but making sure that the leaders of the leaders feel comfortable supporting them in development is really essential. Again, you want to make sure you do this before the development begins, and it helps leaders to model accountability and create that culture of learning. One last thing that you can consider if you plan to use a lot of assessments is getting certified in an assessment. So you can dive deeper and learn how to use tools like the LSP-R or the 360 feedback assessment called the Sigma Radius. And this could even support your HR or talent function in feeling really confident that you know the assessment inside and out, and then you can use that information to develop people in your organization even better. All right, we'll pause for a poll question here. How confident are you in your leaders' abilities to coach and develop their team members? Would you say very confident, somewhat confident, or not very confident? All right, Helen, how are those polls looking?
We've got 5% saying very confident, and the largest group, 67%, saying somewhat confident. Oh, that just increased to 68%. And at the moment, 27% saying not very confident.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so shows that overall, I think confidence in leaders' ability to coach and develop their team members could be improved, and that's why a training can be really useful. All right. Next is to begin the process of creating personalized development plans based on the assessment insights. So we do this with our clients. We often do a 3-session sort of debrief of our leadership assessment. And what we do is we have 3 sessions that first start by debriefing. The first session is all about debriefing the results, highlighting those areas of strength and development. The second session is really focusing on areas of development, really pinpointing which priorities are the most important and where they want to focus. And then our third development session helps them to create a development action plan based on the insights, based on the selected developmental priorities, and turning that into a plan for moving forward, how they can take action on their development goals. So I just wanted to give that context around how we do it here and how you might do it in your organization. And we do leverage what's called a talent development workbook in order to support leaders in turning data insights into action. And this really helps individual team members prioritize and organize their growth goals that they have maybe had additional insights on from that assessment. And a few points on these development plans, it's really important to keep them focused and achievable. So in practice, we often encourage people to limit their development areas or focus areas to 1 to 3 areas to make sure that they can get deeper learning and insight rather than selecting 8 and getting a little confused in the process. Then you want to make sure that your development plans are truly actionable by connecting it to real work. So you want to think of things like stretch assignments, mentoring, it could be certification programs or continuing education or coaching to reinforce goals. Make sure that it's really clear what you're going to be working on. So for example, let's say that you're a leader and one of your top areas is delegation. Well, then you'd want to really be specific in your plan around, all right, I want to delegate 20% of my work and I want to leverage these team members and I'm going to have meetings with them and really come up with a plan around how you're going to develop this area and put it in action. And then that also helps you to know when you've taken action, if you've hit your objectives, and then tracking progress over time as well. And then lastly, make your development plans a shared responsibility. So all that coaching for leaders is really leading up to this. It's about including direct leaders in the plan and so that they can support it with just verbal support by aligning opportunities to support stretch goals and beyond. And this really can increase accountability and alignment. And also your leader can see how you're actually actively working on yourself to develop your development areas. So we have a number of free templates on our website that you can consider. This is our development actions form. And you can download this. It likely will come in a PDF form, and it's form fillable. And you can even leverage something like this with your people today. And this also, we have a number of these types of worksheets in our workbook that we offer clients as well. So this is something that can be really helpful. You put down the development area, you look at the timeline, you put actions, track progress over time. So this can be a really helpful resource for keeping all your information in one place and also make a plan for going forward. So I'm not going to be able to touch on every way that you can develop your people, but I am going to highlight some ones that we think are really important and really drive progress. And one of them is coaching. So providing coaching to your team members to drive behavioral change. Coaching can really support leaders in applying feedback, overcoming obstacles, and staying committed. It can be your organization's choice, depending on what you have available to you, whether or not you want to leverage internal or external coaches. Maybe your leaders are really effective at helping others to grow, and you can leverage your own leaders to be a coach, but maybe sometimes leaders are busy and they honestly don't give the time and attention that's needed and required for development, and that's when an external coach can also be helpful. External coaches are also really helpful for the most senior level, and especially if there's going to be any transitions, such as a CEO transitioning out of the organization and someone else rising into the CEO level. So make sure you match your coaching resources to your program size and your leadership level. When you're doing coaching sessions, it's really important to bring in that assessment data, bring in that assessment results. Make sure you're using assessment data to shape conversations and the goals that are put on the development actions form. Also, model development from the top. So again, if you're a senior leader getting coaching, that's wonderful. You can share that, you can be transparent, and it really signals that leadership development is a priority. It's helpful for all people, and that the organization is committed to creating the best leadership possible. But coaching is often expensive, and it is hard to therefore provide to all people, for the average organization at least. And so that's why you can also build skills through group learning. You can offer things like competency-based workshops, which we often call lunch and learns, to build these core leadership competencies. And practical sessions can help develop key leadership competencies over time. And it also creates this culture of learning, and everybody is getting the same information at the same time. And even at Sigma, we do tailor our content to be applicable across all levels for the majority of our leadership competencies. You can also host additional workshops on topics like emotional intelligence and character. Again, I mentioned that those can be really helpful competencies, and they're also usually really interesting and fun topics for people to think on and talk about. So as an organization, if you talked about character and people were able to say, oh, look, like I score really high in humanity, or I score really high in drive, it can be a really interesting conversation for people. Again, you want to select topics based on group development needs. So if you give assessments to your group and then you're able to look at the group level strengths and the group level development needs, this will really help you to select the workshops that are going to be most effective in developing your workforce. And again, it really can create organizational wide culture and consistent expectations and ideological frameworks around what does a leader look like in our organization and what might be expected of leaders here. Then lastly, you can take it even deeper through things like leadership programs and mentoring. So you can provide multi-day leadership programs for more structured growth. You can design mentoring programs that support connection and knowledge transfer. You can also include peer groups. This one is really important as well, which is to create career pathways for each level. That's something we're really seeing in the employee data, just in general. We're seeing that people are wanting to grow in their careers and feel like they have opportunities, and they might even leave organizations if that's not present. And then lastly, you can reinforce self-awareness through shared tools and language. So keeping those assessments top of mind, talking about assessments, using the language of assessments also supports creating that shared culture. And I want to say there's a lot of development methods I haven't mentioned here just to the sake of time, but there's things like job shadowing, supporting your people and going to get additional education, such as through formal education or certification methods. There's individual learning, such as through books or online modules. So there's a lot of different ways that people can develop, but it can be very helpful to provide a structured methodology for your organization. All right, our next poll question is, which development strategy do you think would be most effective in your organization? Would it be one-on-one coaching, lunch and learns, or leadership competency workshops, mentoring or peer learning, formal multi-day leadership programs, other, or we do not offer structured development programs? And if you say other, please let us know what other means in the chat. All right, Helen, how's that data looking?
As of right now, we've got 18% saying one-on-one coaching would be most effective, 23% saying lunch and learns or group workshops. The winner at the moment, 36% saying mentoring or peer learning, 18% saying formal multi-day leadership programs, and 5% saying we do not currently offer structured development.
Excellent. That's a great blend of things. It's interesting to see that mentoring or peer learning has been most effective for a lot of organizations. And that's something that, we are looking to even support organizations in building out mentoring programs, because it can be hard to get started, but it can be such a powerful tool once there is a structured mentoring or peer learning group. So excellent. Thank you. And then lastly, it's important to measure and track growth over time. So monitor development, individuals' readiness for the next role, levels of retention, and internal mobility, such as internal promotions. And that can be really helpful to see how well your program is working. For example, if you have a leadership development program, but nobody is ever promoted upward internally or very rarely, that might show that, maybe the program isn't doing exactly what it needs to do. Make sure that measurement is a part of the process. So you're going to want to measure things at the front end to make sure you have a baseline. So maybe you get a baseline for your rate of turnover, for the percentage of people getting development, and there can be many other metrics depending on your organizational context. So make sure you get that number down. And then you remeasure every 6 months to a year, maybe even 18 months, depending on the metric. And then you can see whether or not there's changes over time. And this will help reinforce accountability, but also visualize and celebrate progress at every level. And then as much as possible, connect these outcomes to business goals in order to showcase how development can positively influence culture, strategy, and team performance as well. So as a recap of our process, clarify the leadership skills you need, assess the talent you have, and then develop skills and measure progress. Here is just one final graphic we have for you, just to kind of see all of it together. Here's all of our steps kind of mapped out. We have the overall 3 phases with 7 steps underneath that, such as discover need, review talent, assess talent, prepare leaders, build plans, develop skills, and measure progress. But this also represents all the service offerings that Sigma could support you on. So if you need help in any of these domains, including, of course, getting assessments in the first place, that's something that we'd love to support you on. So as you go forward, you can reflect on some of the following questions. Which phase of development need more attention in your organization? How could assessments help personalize development for your leaders? What support would your leaders need to help coach and develop others more effectively? What type of structured leadership development program could your organization do more of? And does your organization measure progress and keep up on those metrics over time? And I think for the sake of time, I'll skip this last poll session and we can just jump into the Q&A.
Sounds great. Thank you very much, Ariana. Okay, we have one question that I'll start with, and then we have a few common questions from past engagements that we've had with clients. So we'll run through those. And if anyone else here in the session has questions that come up, don't be afraid to post those in the chat and the Q&A. We would love to prioritize your questions. but it's also great to learn from some of the common questions that others have had. Okay, so the first question from our group is accountability built into any of these skills? This was back when you were talking about the competency framework, Ariana. So I mentioned that dependability would be a good competency that covers that, but wanted to give you some space to talk about any other competencies or also how accountability is built into the framework overall.
Definitely. Yeah, accountability is something that is really important. So I think that's a good competency to highlight. I think it's one of our main competencies in this area is just being really dependable. Dependability in our model means following through with what your expectations are on your job and also what you say you'll do. So I think that ties in really close with dependability and accountability and just making sure that your leaders can be counted on to follow through. But it's also something that you also need to monitor a lot at the program level. So for example, like I mentioned during the session, sometimes we have leaders that aren't necessarily accountable to supporting their direct reports' development. And there also are times where leadership can get really busy and just lose sight of the program altogether. So it can be really helpful to support accountability with some different structures and processes. For example, having one person who truly owns this program and all of the elements that are a part of it is really helpful to start, because if there's not one person who has full oversight, then it can kind of go to multiple people and then nobody is feeling like confident or responsible for overseeing it. That can happen. Also, having check-ins for this specifically, especially with senior leaders, can be really important. So making sure there's time on the calendar to discuss these topics and to consider what progress is being made, how is this beneficial, and beyond. And then lastly, just making sure that at an organization level, you're looking at those metrics year after year, that you're collecting them. And that can be a really helpful thing in being accountable, showing the value of a program like this, and showing that, look, over time, when we develop our people, they foster better teams within the organization. Their teams perform better. They're bringing better soft skills and interpersonal skills as leaders. That's helping to contribute to employee retention. And in the process, we're actually elevating leaders throughout our organization through internal promotion. And that helps really connect the dots between something that otherwise can feel fuzzy for people.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Okay, next question. What if our organization is not ready to roll out a full development program?
That's a good question. Yeah, so if your organization's not ready to develop an organization-wide leadership development program, we often recommend starting with a smaller cohort, often closer to the top. In reality, if we can't focus on everybody, we usually go to the top because tone from the top is so important, and our most senior leaders create the culture downward. And so you could select just, your top 25 people to give assessments to, and you could give assessments to a smaller cohort. You could do either one-on-one coaching debriefs of the assessment or a group debrief of the assessment to gain more of those insights and work on development plans. See how that works from you. Collect survey feedback from those group of leaders to see, is this having impact? Are people liking the material on the face value of it? And how is it coming across to people? And then you can use that information, tweak it a little, and then let's say the next year or 6 months later, you can then assess the next cohort and the next level of leaders and slowly do a rollout of the program.
Great, thank you. That's a really good approach. Speaking of assessments, what is the best way to introduce an assessment without making leaders or participants who would be taking the assessment feel judged?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so this is a question that we sometimes get in practice, which I find is kind of interesting, but I think everything in this space is really about framing. So presenting it as a new opportunity, an opportunity for personal insight and growth, an opportunity to be considered as a top leader at this organization and be included in a leadership development program. I think any way you can communicate what this is about to showcase the strengths rather than to make it seem disciplinary or another task that they have to do, kind of create that language to make it seem like an exciting opportunity. And then I think that the group debriefs can help as well, because you can see that everybody has something to work on. You can come together as a group and it can feel like we're all doing this with transparency and clarity. And then ultimately, hopefully, the assessment that you provide is a truly helpful resource for leaders. They get to learn more about themselves and become a better leader over time. So hopefully they're the type of leader who can be inspired by that kind of vision.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's have one more question before we close with the professional development credit administrative stuff. How many competencies should we focus on in a development plan?
Yes, I think I briefly touched on this before, but the best number of competencies to focus on is between 1 and 3. It can be tempting to include more, but really, you're looking at over a targeted period trying to develop key competencies. So really, 1 to 3 is the typical sweet spot for organizations. And you can select just 3 for 6 months, and then you can come back and say, look, I've really improved in these areas. I feel like I have this well underway. Maybe I want to look at selecting a new 3. So that's totally feasible and is a great approach for over time, but you don't want to overwhelm anyone with too many development priorities, so much so that they kind of get lost and you kind of lose focus on what you're truly focusing on. So that's why I would say really focusing with a more narrow amount and then expanding over time.
Thank you very much. Okay, and I think that's all we have time for today. If you have any other questions as you're reviewing the recording of the webinar or the slides, please don't hesitate to send us an email. We'd be happy to go over that with you. And just to close, if you are here to receive SHRM or ATD professional development credits, please let us know. I'm going to launch a poll here shortly, particularly for SHRM, because I will need to send you a certificate of completion. So if this doesn't apply to you, just ignore the poll. And if it does, please let us know which professional development credit you would like to receive. You'll get the activity code for SHRM. For ATD, I believe if you are collecting those PDCs, you'll already have all the information you need to claim that point. And then last but not least, if you enjoyed our webinar, feel free to check out others. We have one more this year on how to use talent assessment specifically for succession planning. So we can dive a little bit deeper on that one particular aspect of talent development. And if there are any future webinars that you would like to see, please let us know. We take feedback into account every time that we review these webinars. I'll also post a link to a little feedback survey. It should only take a minute or two. So if you have any feedback that you'd like to share, please do fill that out. We review every response and we do make changes to the format of these webinars based on what you say, because we want these to be helpful for you. All right, that's everything. We've got another 2 minutes or so, so I'll just hang out for a moment in case anyone has any questions in the chat that I can respond to. And if not, then we hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you, Dr. Arieana Thompson, for being with us and for sharing all of that information. We hope you all took something useful, templates or strategies, and that you can take this back to your organization to build your own talent development strategies.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Thanks so much for joining our webinar today, and do reach out if you need anything further.
Thank you, everyone.